I wasn't supposed to be home that day. The flight change came through while I was still in the airport lounge, one of those dull, logistical updates that usually mean nothing. I didn't text him. I wanted to surprise him. Dinner, maybe a movie on the couch, normal things. The kind of normal you believe in when you're engaged and planning a future that feels solid. I unlocked the apartment door quietly. The lease was in my name. He'd moved in 2 years ago. For a brief moment, everything felt familiar. My shoes by the door, the faint smell of detergent, the low hum of the fridge. Then I heard it. Sounds from the bedroom. Not subtle, not confusing. The kind that makes your chest tighten before your mind catches up. For about 10 seconds, I couldn't move. My pulse roared in my ears. I remember noticing how steady my hands looked, how calm they seemed, like they belonged to someone else. Then I walked down the hall and pushed the door open. There he was, with another woman. Someone I recognized immediately, someone I had met before, someone who knew exactly who I was, someone who knew he was engaged. She gasped. He froze, then scrambled for his clothes, and I just stood there, detached, like I was watching a scene from a movie I hadn't chosen to be in. It's not what it looks like. Please, let me explain. The words landed flat, empty, predictable. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I told them both to get out. Now. The other woman rushed past me without a word. My fiancé, my former fiancé, reached for my arm, his face tight, jaw clenched, his voice low and urgent as he begged me to listen. I pulled away and sat down on the couch instead. I told him he had 1 hour to pack a bag and leave. He could come back for the rest later. He left, and with him went the life I thought I was living. I assumed that was the worst part, that the betrayal itself would be the deepest cut. I was wrong. Within 48 hours, my phone started lighting up. Not with concern, not with, "Are you okay?" but with opinions, judgments, instructions on how I should feel and what I should forgive. People I'd known for more than a decade. People who had stayed in my houses, eaten my food, borrowed my money. People I'd called family. They weren't asking how I was holding up. They were telling me I was being dramatic. She said it was only once. 4 years is a long time to throw away. Relationships take work. You don't just walk away. I stared at my phone, my hands finally starting to shake. These were the same people who had spent summers at my beach house, the same people who had crashed in my rental property when money was tight, the same people who had always assumed I would be there, no questions asked. And now they were telling me I should quietly accept being betrayed. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not explosively, just a clean, cold clarity. This wasn't just about a man who cheated. It was about everyone who expected me to swallow it. And that was when I stopped explaining myself. I met him 4 years earlier, at a time when my life felt steady but quiet. I was working long hours as a software engineer, the kind of job that pays well, but drains you in ways you don't notice until you're too tired to care. My social life was small, a few close friends, familiar routines. I wasn't lonely, exactly, but I wasn't expecting anything new either. He came into my life through mutual friends. A casual introduction at a weekend gathering, nothing dramatic. He was charming in an easy, unforced way. Not loud, not showy. The kind of man who listened more than he talked, who made you feel like what you were saying mattered. We started talking that night and didn't really stop after that. The relationship unfolded slowly, intentionally. We didn't rush anything. He stayed over sometimes, then more often. Eventually, he moved in. 2 years into the relationship, we decided it made sense. The lease was already in my name, and it felt practical, not symbolic. At the time, practicality felt like maturity. I had always been careful with money. Not obsessive, just mindful. My grandmother had left me a small house when she passed away 5 years earlier. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid. Instead of selling it, I fixed it up and turned it into a rental property. It became a steady source of income, something that made me feel secure in a way my job alone never quite did. 2 years later, my grandfather passed, and I inherited a modest beach house, 3 bedrooms, 40 minutes from the coast. Nothing luxurious, but it had space, light, and a sense of calm that pulled people in. It didn't take long for it to become the default gathering place for our friend group, barbecues, long weekends, holidays. I didn't mind, at first. I liked being generous. I liked being reliable. I liked knowing people felt comfortable around me, and he fit easily into that world, laughing with my friends, helping himself to the fridge, acting like the beach house was ours, together. When he proposed 8 months before everything fell apart, it felt right, quiet, thoughtful. He gave me a ring one evening at home, no crowd, no spectacle. Just us, sitting on the couch. I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was planned for June. Looking back now, I can see the small imbalances. The way my properties slowly became our resources without ever being discussed. The way friends stayed in my rental house for embarrassingly low rent because we're all family here. The way the beach house keys were passed around like communal property. But at the time, it didn't feel like exploitation. It felt like loyalty. I trusted him. I trusted the people around us. I believed that years of shared history meant something solid, that when things got hard, those bonds would hold. I thought commitment meant endurance, that love meant flexibility, that being understanding was a strength. I didn't know then that I was slowly becoming the foundation everyone stood on, while no one bothered to check whether I was cracking. By the time the engagement photos were taken, by the time invitations were being talked about, my life looked full from the outside. Successful career, long-term relationship, supportive social circle, properties that everyone loved to use. It never occurred to me that the same people smiling at me, celebrating my engagement, would one day tell me to forgive the unforgivable, or that the man I trusted enough to plan a future with would be the one to break it first. Things started to shift in ways I didn't immediately notice. At first, it was subtle, little things. The way he'd come home late, tired, but not in the way that made me feel like I should give him space. It was more like he was mentally distant, even when he was physically there. He didn't talk about his day as much. He didn't ask about mine. I thought it was just stress from work, or maybe something he wasn't ready to share. It wasn't alarming, not yet. I told myself it was normal. He was just going through something, and I'd be patient. It wasn't until a few months later, at a social gathering, that I felt the first real flicker of doubt. I had stepped out of the room for a moment to grab a drink. As I re-entered, I saw him laughing with one of my colleagues, a woman I had introduced to him once at a work event. It had been a casual introduction, nothing more than a polite exchange. She was a colleague of mine, someone I worked with in passing, and I had assumed that was all there was to it. I didn't think much of it when I introduced them. They were both friendly, but I thought it was just out of courtesy. But something about the way they interacted made my stomach twist. They were standing too close, their conversation too comfortable. The way their faces were soft, like they shared a familiarity that went beyond a simple work connection. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, they were just colleagues, and I had introduced them in a social setting. Nothing about their interaction screamed danger to me at the time, but something in my gut stirred. The following weeks passed with small changes that I tried to ignore. The way he stopped being open about his day, the way he would sometimes get a text, smile, and then quickly put his phone away. It wasn't something I could confront directly, not without sounding crazy. It could have been nothing. It was probably nothing. But then came the first major sign. The night we argued over something stupid. It wasn't even about anything important. Who forgot to pick up groceries? A miscommunication about plans. But when I brought it up, he got defensive. Not just a little. It was like a switch flipped in him, and he turned cold. His tone was sharp, dismissive. He didn't listen, and when I tried to explain how his words had hurt me, he just shut down. "I'm not in the mood to talk about this right now," he snapped, turning away. I stood there feeling completely alone. It wasn't just the argument, it was the way he withdrew, like I wasn't even worth his effort anymore. But I didn't press. I let it go. I didn't want to create unnecessary tension. It was just one argument, right? Relationships have ups and downs. He'd come around. But as the days went on, I found myself noticing more of the little things. The way he stopped being open about his day. The way he would sometimes get a text, smile, and then quickly put his phone away. It wasn't something I could confront directly, not without sounding crazy. It could have been nothing. It was probably nothing. But then came the night I walked into the apartment early, a few weeks before everything shattered. It wasn't just the noises from the bedroom. It wasn't just the shock of seeing him with someone else. It was the realization that something had shifted long before I'd noticed. He wasn't the same man I had fallen in love with, and neither was I. It all came crashing down faster than I expected. I wasn't planning on coming home early that day, but when my flight got moved up, I decided to surprise him. A quick text saying I was on my way, then a spontaneous idea to grab dinner together. Something simple, just the two of us. I was excited, feeling the warmth of anticipation, imagining us laughing over a meal like we used to. But as soon as I walked into the apartment, I knew something was wrong. I heard the faint noise from the bedroom before I even saw them. The sound of someone fumbling, quick, urgent. My heart stopped. I couldn't explain it, just a gut feeling that froze me in place. The door was slightly ajar. I stood there for a moment, trying to breathe. Was it a dream? A horrible mistake? I pushed the door open slowly, almost reluctantly. And there they were. He was with her, the colleague I'd introduced him to months ago. She was lying on the bed, half dressed, and he was beside her, pulling away in a panic when he saw me. The shock hit me in waves, but what struck me more than anything was the look on his face. He wasn't even sorry at first. His first reaction was to stand up, scrambling for his clothes like I had no right to be there. His eyes avoided mine as if I wasn't even part of the picture. She didn't even try to explain. She just stared at me, her face pale and caught in the act, guilty but not apologetic. My mind raced, but I stayed quiet, processing. It wasn't until he started talking, stammering through his words, that I snapped back into reality. It's not what it looks like. I didn't mean for this to happen. His voice was shaky, but there was no true remorse, just panic. I didn't give him a chance to say more. Really? I said, my voice barely a whisper. You didn't mean for this to happen? He hesitated, but I couldn't look at him anymore. My eyes were burning and my chest ached, but I stayed calm, my voice cold as ice. I want you both out, now. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. The rest can be taken later, but I don't want to see either of you again. I didn't wait for him to respond. He tried to speak, to beg for a chance to explain, but I wasn't listening anymore. His words were meaningless. They both scrambled for their things, but it wasn't enough. They left, the two of them, both in a hurry, walking out of my life, leaving nothing but shattered trust behind. But the damage had already been done. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the years I had given him, the faith I had placed in him, and how easily it was all ripped away. I sat there, staring at the empty apartment. The silence was suffocating. And for the first time, I allowed myself to fully feel the weight of what had just happened. I thought I'd known heartbreak before, but this was something different. This wasn't just about losing him. This was about losing myself. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Tenant 1, one of my closest friends, who lived in my rental property at a much lower rent than market price. He had been one of my best friends for years, and I had helped him out when he needed a place to stay. Are you okay? I heard what happened. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I didn't have the strength to explain, to justify. Everything had already been laid bare, and I needed space to breathe, to figure out what came next. And that was when this messages started. From him, from people I thought I could trust. Please hear him out. It was a mistake. Don't make a decision in anger. But I wasn't ready to hear any of it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Done with the lies, done with the betrayal, done with the people who thought I should still give him a chance after everything. I looked around the apartment at the life we'd built, and I realized I didn't know who I was anymore. Was I the woman who stayed or the one who walked away? I made my decision quietly in the silence of that room. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. I wasn't going to be the one who held on to something that was already broken. I was going to let go. The days following the betrayal felt like I was drowning, not in sadness, but in an overwhelming tide of betrayal and disrespect. My mind was clouded with questions, but none of them were getting any answers. And the worst part wasn't just him, it was everyone else. The messages from my friends, my so-called support system, only served to make me feel more isolated. I didn't expect support from all of them. But the complete disregard for my feelings from some of the people I considered closest to me was something I wasn't prepared for. The first few texts came from Tenant 1, who had been living in my rental for years, at a significantly reduced rate. He had been one of my best friends for years, someone I considered family. But now I was questioning everything about that friendship. His text was simple, almost too simple. You should talk to him. He's really sorry. You're both better than this. And that was it. No mention of how I was feeling. No acknowledgement of the pain that had been inflicted on me. It was as though the years of friendship didn't matter. He was already focusing on defending Fiancé, and that was it. No, I'm here for you. No, I'm sorry this happened. just pressure to forgive him. Tenant 2, another close friend who had been living in my property for almost the same amount of time, didn't even offer any sympathy. He simply sent, "Come on, you're throwing away everything over one mistake? Everyone makes mistakes." One mistake? This wasn't just a mistake. This was a breach of trust so deep that I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. But instead of comforting me, Tenant 2 minimized what had happened, telling me I was overreacting. He didn't see my pain. He only saw the relationship that Fiancé and I had built as more important than my feelings. It was like my emotional trauma didn't matter. But that wasn't all. The following day, my mother called. She didn't understand why I was being so harsh. She had always known Fiancé as a good person and couldn't fathom that he could be the one who broke my heart. "Honey, I just talked to Tenant 1 and he told me everything. You're overreacting, and I'm sure this can be worked out. You don't want to make a permanent decision in anger. You've built so much together. Think about your future." Think about my future? Was she seriously asking me to forgive a man who had broken me, betrayed my trust, and humiliated me? She was more concerned about the future I had imagined with him than the reality I was living through. I stayed silent, not wanting to get into a heated argument. She didn't understand, and I realized that maybe she never would. Tenant 1 and Tenant 2 weren't the only ones who tried to interfere. My aunt, who always had an opinion on everything, also reached out. She had heard about what happened from Tenant 1 and apparently wanted to make sure I was doing okay. But I knew exactly why she was calling. She wasn't concerned about my well-being. She was more interested in Fiancé and wanted to make sure I didn't make any rash decisions. "Your friend says there's been a misunderstanding about some property. He seems very upset about what's happening between you two. I think you need to be more patient." I didn't even respond. There was nothing to say. I was done explaining myself to people who couldn't understand the depth of my hurt. And it wasn't just about them. It was about me, about finally standing up for myself. And then one of my coworkers, someone who had seen me go through the ups and downs with Fiancé, reached out, but not to check on me. She wasn't concerned about how I was doing. Instead, she texted, "I heard what happened. He made a mistake, but relationships are hard. Maybe you should talk to him. Everyone makes mistakes. Don't throw it all away." It felt like the world was trying to convince me that forgiveness was the only option. But what they didn't realize was that forgiveness wasn't what I needed. What I needed was support, respect, and a moment to heal. Not more people trying to tell me what to do, trying to minimize my feelings. I wasn't ready to hear their justifications. I didn't need their permission to feel hurt. I didn't need them to tell me I was overreacting. In the midst of all this pressure, I realized the full weight of what had been happening all along. Fiancé's betrayal wasn't just about him. It was about how others had allowed it to happen. It was about the lack of boundaries, people using my kindness to manipulate, guilt trip, and pressure me into submission. I was done. I walked out of the apartment, leaving my phone behind. The calls, the messages, they could all wait. I needed to breathe. I needed to be alone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lifting off my chest. I would no longer let them decide my fate. I would no longer let their opinions dictate how I felt. The fallout came swiftly, like a storm I had been waiting for but never truly prepared for. It wasn't just about Fiancé anymore. It was about the people I had trusted, the people I had spent years helping, supporting, and caring for. People I had opened my home to, people I had thought of as family, and now they were the ones who were making everything worse. The first thing I did after my final decision was to cut off all contact. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses or apologies. I had already been clear about what I needed, and they had all ignored me. I called my house manager and instructed them to send the formal eviction notice to Tenant 1 and Tenant 2. The lease was month to month, and I had the right to ask them to leave. They had been living in my rental property at a rate far below the market value for years, and now it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. It felt like a small victory, but the real consequences were coming. I went to the beach house the next day and changed the locks. I didn't want anyone else using my property without my permission. This house had been a place of peace for me once, but now it felt like a symbol of everything I had lost. I wasn't going to let anyone invade that space again. I reset the gate code, put new deadbolts on the door, and took away any access they had. I wasn't going to be passive about this anymore. When Tenant 1 found out about the eviction notice, he tried to get me to change my mind. He called and texted, pleading with me to give him a chance to fix things, to to offer him one more month to stay. But I wasn't interested. I wasn't the one who had broken trust. I wasn't the one who had betrayed the friendship. I was done. The real consequences came when Tenant 1 and Tenant 2 were forced to find new accommodations. With no notice, they had to scramble to find a place to live. The market had gotten tighter, and prices were sky high. The house they had been living in, at a fraction of the market rate, was no longer available to them. They ended up having to move into a much smaller place, paying nearly triple what they had been paying me. It wasn't just about the money, it was the shame. I had taken care of them for so long, and now they had to deal with the reality of living on their own, without the cushion they had gotten used to. And it wasn't long before I heard the gossip. They had moved in with a friend temporarily, bouncing from sofa to sofa, with no stability, no safety net. And still, it wasn't enough for them to just leave me alone. A few days after the eviction, Tenant 1 and Tenant 2, along with a couple of the other friends from our group, decided they could still use the beach house. They had been so accustomed to just showing up whenever they liked, believing that they had a right to my property. But when they arrived to find the locks had been changed, they tried to break in. I saw the notification from my Ring camera in the middle of the night. There they were, trying the door handles, trying windows, trying to break into a place that wasn't theirs anymore. I had already anticipated this kind of behavior, so I wasn't caught off guard. I immediately contacted my lawyer, explaining the situation and providing the footage. They advised me to send a formal warning. The next day, I had my lawyer send a strongly worded letter to Tenant 1 and Tenant 2, warning them that any further attempts to trespass on my property would result in legal action. I made it clear that I would pursue charges if they tried to break in again. After that, I didn't hear from them again. They backed off, but it was a bitter victory. The people I had helped, the people I had supported, had turned on me when I needed them most. But that was the reality. People who take and take without ever considering your needs will never be there for you when it matters. Fiancé, as expected, never reached out to me directly again. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. I wasn't going to be the one waiting around for him to fix things. I wasn't going to chase after someone who had already chosen someone else over me. I focused on the things I could control. I focused on my future. I spent time reimagining my life without him, without all of them. It was hard, but every day I felt stronger. The most important lesson I learned wasn't just to let go of toxic people. It was to demand respect from others and from myself. I had spent so long trying to be everything for everyone else that I had forgotten that I needed to be everything for me. As the days went on, I could feel myself healing. Slowly but surely, the anger began to fade, and in its place came a quiet strength. I was no longer the woman who stayed in toxic relationships, who forgave without limits. I was the woman who made choices for herself, who set boundaries, and who no longer tolerated disrespect. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living, not surviving, not waiting for someone else to fix things for me, but truly living. The days after everything fell apart were quieter than I'd expected. In the beginning, I thought the aftermath would be overwhelming. Constant reminders of what I had lost, feelings of loneliness, frustration, or guilt. But as the weeks passed, I began to realize something that surprised me. I wasn't just surviving, I was actually starting to feel like myself again. The beach house that had once felt like a symbol of everything that had gone wrong was now becoming a sanctuary. I spent hours there alone, walking along the shore, letting the sound of the waves soothe my mind. I had begun to make it my own again. Slowly, piece by piece, I was rebuilding the space and my life. I no longer felt like I was waiting for someone else to fix things for me. I had already done the hardest thing. I let go of the people who had hurt me, and now I was focusing on what I needed to heal. It wasn't easy. The memories of Fiancé still lingered. His empty apologies, the way he looked at me with those pleading eyes. But I had come to terms with the fact that some people don't deserve second chances. His actions were a reflection of his choices, and I had the power to choose my own path. One afternoon, as I sat in the beach house, I got a call from my mom. It had been weeks since the last conversation, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Honey," she said softly, her voice filled with concern, "how are you really doing?" I let out a slow breath. "I'm doing better. It's been hard, but I'm okay. I'm finally starting to focus on myself." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm proud of you, you know. I may not have understood everything at first, but I see that you're strong, and that's all that matters. You deserve happiness, and I think you'll find it, in your own time." Her words were like a balm to the parts of me that still felt wounded. For the first time, I felt like I had her support in a way I had never had before. It wasn't about forgiving Fiancé or anyone else. It was about honoring what I needed to move forward. It was about letting go of the idea that my happiness depended on others. I didn't need to be validated by people who had never really been there for me. The only person who could give me what I needed was me. I also made the decision to put the rental property back on the market at full price. The tenants, Tenant 1 and Tenant 2, had learned the consequences of taking advantage of my generosity. They were forced to find somewhere else to live, paying more than they ever had before, moving from sofa to sofa. The guilt trips and attempts to manipulate me into feeling sorry for them didn't work. They had to face the consequences of their actions, just like Fiancé had to face his. The beach house remained mine, and it was no longer a place of regret. It was my space, my refuge. I painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and even planted a small garden in the backyard. Every time I looked at the ocean, I felt more grounded, more whole. It wasn't just the property I was reclaiming. It was myself. I began to meet new people, people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. I joined a book club, went to yoga classes, and even started seeing someone casually, someone who respected me and didn't want to change me. It was nothing serious yet, but it felt nice to be seen for who I was, not for what I could provide or what others expected of me. As time passed, I realized that the pain I had felt wasn't gone, but it wasn't overwhelming me anymore. I had learned how to turn my pain into strength. I had found my own voice, and it was powerful. The lesson wasn't just about cutting people out of my life. It was about understanding that I didn't need to accept disrespect from anyone. I had spent so many years trying to be what everyone else needed me to be, but I finally saw that the most important thing was to be true to myself. I wasn't defined by the people who had hurt me. I was defined by how I chose to move forward.